Wow, it has been a long year, and it's only March. And while the world has burned down around us, I went back to school for another semester. And in this video, we're going to be delving deeper into one of the courses I took this year. And to do that, we're going to do something that involves something that I care a lot about, photography. I've been really into photography for about 3 or 4 years now. And I mostly focus on wildlife, but today we're going to be talking about landscapes. It's easy to see them as just a pretty picture, but they go in to communicate things that we feel about these landscapes. Political concepts, cultural concepts, are very foundational ideas about the world around us. And broadly, it's conversations around those ideas and how they relate to the environment that we've been covering a lot of in this course. Now, I'm sure some eyes are already glazing over at the idea of talking in depth about cultural, political, and emotional landscapes about the environment. So we're going to jump into a real-world example right away. The real-world example we're using are my pictures from Big Bend National Park in Texas. They're great photos, it's a great landscape, but it's not a coincidence I'm bringing up national parks. In fact, William Cronon, one of the authors we read this semester, specifically brings up the National Park Service in his very influential essay, The Trouble with Wilderness. Specifically, he brought up how the National Park Service plays into Western conceptions of the frontier and erase some of the messiness around it. The myth of the wilderness as virgin, uninhabited land had always been especially cruel when seen from the perspective of the Indians who had once called that land home. They were forced to move elsewhere. Tourists could safely enjoy the illusion that they were seeing their nation in its pristine original state in the new morning of God's own creation. But hey, wait a second. I was one of those tourists. I went there, I took these pictures, I shared them with other people. I went on big hikes, I saw a lot of cool things, look how happy I was. Am I responsible for the historical legacy of national parks? Well, no, but as photographers, as people looking at photographs and enjoying landscapes, we have a responsibility to understand the histories of these landscapes. And we have a responsibility to grapple with the contentious issues around them, not ignore them and pretend they don't exist. Like, national parks find their roots in the same places you can find the roots of second most racist man in history, Andrew Jackson's speeches about Manifest Destiny. What good man would prefer a country covered with forests and ranged by a few thousand savages to our extensive republic? Stamp that on the Yellowstone sign. But this isn't to say that all national parks are bad or there's no good that's come from them or you're a terrible person for going to them. But I think it speaks towards a need to understand these landscapes as lived in rather than pristine and in their original states. There's a historical wrong here that's happened. We've removed people from these lands who had a connection to the history. I mean, in Big Bend alone, there is evidence for human habitation that goes back 11,000 years when megafauna still roamed North America. Like, this is fascinating history that we should be doing a better job of presenting and talking about. This picture isn't just a picture. It's a place that has meant things to people for thousands and thousands of years. Look, there is a bigger conversation that is happening around Indigenous people and their erasure from frontier romance and their historical relationship with the United States and national parks and all of that stuff. But in the interest of not, continuing a trend this year of being horribly depressed and angry about the state of the world, we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about this picture. I took this photo in Costa Rica, and it's a nice photo. It translates what I think is the popular image of Costa Rica. Beautiful rainforests that stretch on from a beautiful coast. But what you don't see in this photo is what I, as the photographer, intentionally kept out. A palm oil plantation. We know palm is bad. It's killing the orangutans, it's burning down primary rainforests. So what is it that palm oil is killing in Latin America? Is it the spider monkeys, the howler monkeys? Before starting research into this project, I sort of felt like I was the unwitting villain in this story, who had used the format of images to shift narratives and play into previously held narratives. Even when I was planning the trip, I wanted this to be something authentic. I went to small, remote hostels in the middle of the jungle, away from tourist traps. And the image of these palm plantations sort of unsettled that feeling for me. And so I omitted them when I was sharing images with other people. I wanted them to get the same image that I had imagined before doing this trip. But as with everything we've talked about in this course, nothing is this simple. The history of palm oil in Costa Rica goes back about to the 1920s, when the United Fruit Company started to import oil palm from Africa. Now, if you know anything about that company and how it relates to Central America, your alarm bells are going off. Mine certainly were. But it's not going there. I promise. Flash forward to the 1990s. Oil palm is now an international commodity. It is traded and sold at set prices that are set by international bodies that... Marks, get out of here. Get out of here. That guy shows up in every class I've taken this year. Anyways, demand exploded in the 90s as the food industry sought to reduce fat content of their oils, and soon every industry was falling over themselves for this magical crop that solved all of their problems. It mixes well, it fries well, it's a foaming agent, it increases the melting point of ice cream. It has passed soy as the #1 consumed vegetable, and I'm mad about that not just because they're calling it a vegetable. So, it saves companies money. All industries have a vested interest in keeping prices low and stable, and suddenly Borneo is on fire. I'm not going to relitigate that entire history. In my sources below, there's a great article from The Guardian. You can explore more there. But how does all this relate to Latin America? Latin America was a bit late to the party. But very quickly, production ramped up. And if you're like me, at this point, I was feeling a lot of dread as I was typing these keywords into my Google Scholar search. But the turn I was waiting for didn't come. Research from the University of Puerto Rico found that 79% of oil palm plantation expansion in Latin America occurred on previously intervened lands, like cow pasture and banana plantations. I found more research to suggest that oil palm, when it is used to replace cow pasture, actually improves soil carbon retention, and it is either a neutral transition or a net benefit on carbon storage. And to top it off, the best study I found that directly spoke to my fears and concerns, especially related to my experiences, was a paper published by Stanford as part of an initiative focused on the area of Costa Rica this photo was taken. They asked local farmers how they felt about the conversion to oil palm, and the farmers reported that the prices were more stable, the amount of labor they needed to do on the land reduced, and about half reported more frequent sightings of wildlife than in previous land use regimens. And as someone who was there, I certainly saw a lot of wildlife. Now, I don't want to pretend this is all sunshine and rainbows. There are definitely issues with how oil palm is being expanded, specifically around some sketchy and maybe predatory contract practices from some of the palm oil exporters and producers in the area. And who's to say how long prices will be stable and comfortable for these farmers? But it's not the story I thought I was going to find, and it's probably not the story you thought this was going to be either. So, at the end of all this, I don't know. Crop out the palm, don't crop out the palm. That's up to you. But grapple with the art. Delve into your assumptions, and you might just learn something.